Should you ask people to opt into organ donation, or should donating organs be the default? Well, assuming you want as many organ donations as possible, there is a correct answer to this question. In this video, I'm exploring how governments change behavior through psychology rather than big government programs. Specifically, I'll be looking at the behavioral economics idea of a nudge, look at some policy applications of nudges, and, of course, the pros and cons of nudges instead of shoves. So, let's dive right in. The concept of nudging originates from the field of behavioral economics, which emerged as a challenge to the rational actor theory dominant in classical economics. In the late 20th century, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky laid the groundwork by documenting systemic cognitive biases, like that we fear losses more than valuing gains, that shape human decision-making. Building on this, economists Richard Thaler collaborated with legal scholar Cass Sunstein to propose a new approach to public policy, libertarian paternalism. Originally published in the journal American Economic Review in 2003, they turned the idea into their 2008 book, Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness. The idea being that governments and institutions can steer individuals toward better choices, not by restricting options, but by designing choice environments that account for predictable human behavior. A nudge is essentially a way of making better decisions the easier or more natural one, without taking away the freedom to choose something else. Of course, who decides what the better decision is itself a big point of discussion when it comes to nudge policies. So thinking about the question I asked at the start of the video, should you ask people to opt into donating their organs, or should it be the default that people can choose to opt out of? Well, if your only consideration is how can we get the most organ donations, then you should make it the default with the option to opt out. Now you might be thinking there's going to be a group of people that want to donate their organs, and then there's going to be a group of people that don't want to donate their organs. And so no matter how you set up the decision, people are going to fall into either camp, no matter what. Well, actually, there's plenty of reasons why and evidence to support the fact that how you set up the decision really matters in determining which option people will choose, and that it doesn't just come down to their underlying preferences. First, it takes energy to opt out. If you're not that passionate one way or the other, you'll likely just go with whatever's easier to do, and that's the one that's going to not require you any effort to either opt in or opt out of. Secondly, now moving more into the actual behavioral economic side of things, there's the issue of loss aversion. Opting out of donating can feel like losing the chance to do something good. I always think of loss aversion like when I was younger growing up with my brother, and if there were two apples that were essentially the same, I wouldn't really care which one I got until I chose one of those apples. And then there's absolutely no way I would be willing to trade my apple for my brother's apple, even if it was exactly the same. The loss of giving up my apple would feel worse than the gain of getting my brother's apple, even if it's the exact same. Third, we can think about social norms. People will infer that the default is what's expected or endorsed. And no matter how many after-school specials we see about how being different is okay, people still want to fit in. And lastly, there's the idea of moral salience. Going to a government official to say that you don't want to donate your organs can feel morally loaded. I don't want to save someone is harder to say than I didn't go out of my way to save someone. Now, a rational agent, as we have in classical economics, would be equally comfortable opting in as opting out of something. But in practice, defaults shape far more than classical economics predicts. Nudges are contrasted with shoves, coercive measures or incentives that compel or strongly discourage or encourage certain behaviors. The regulation, taxation, and spending policies are going to most often be shove policies. Unlike nudges, which preserve individual choice by only subtly steering decisions, shove policies enforce compliance or punish certain decisions. If we think again about organ donation, which is one of the classic examples when talking about nudge policies, you certainly could use shove policies to get more organ donation. You could have a regulation that forces everyone to donate their organs. You could tax people who aren't organ donors, or you could provide a subsidy to people who are organ donors. Or I guess in this case, it would be taxing or subsidizing their estate. But many people would find the idea of shoving people into organ donation uncomfortable, shall we say. Whereas the default of organ donation, but allowing people to opt out, preserves the right for people who, for any number of reasons, do not want to donate their organs, that option without being punished by the state. However, in many cases, nudge policies simply aren't effective enough to achieve the desired result, and so shove policies are the way to go. Nudges aren't limited to organ donation. In fact, there's many different types of nudges. For example, a utility company can add a comparison of your energy usage to that of your neighbors to encourage you to reduce your energy consumption. This is because of the idea of a social norm and not wanting to use more energy than your neighbors. Another example is pre-booked vaccinations. If you're just told when and where to get your vaccine, you're more likely to get it than if you have to go out of the way to book it yourself. This is related to the idea of loss aversion and, again, social norms. Another example would be pre-filled tax returns. You're more likely to complete your tax return, not only because it takes less effort because it's been partially pre-filled for you, but also because of the obligation that you feel that, well, the government's done some of the work for me, so I feel obliged to do my part. So again, thinking about the definition of nudges that I provided earlier in the video, in each of these examples, you can see governments designing choice environments that account for predictable human behavior to get their desired outcome. While nudges can be effective in shaping behavior, they do have some significant limitations. Their impact is often modest and context dependent, meaning while nudges may work well for simple, low-stakes decisions, they can struggle to influence complex or deeply ingrained behaviors. Because nudges typically rely on subtle changes to choice environments, their effects can be temporary or less robust once people realize the nudge is there or when underlying incentives remain unchanged. Additionally, nudges are not a replacement for more comprehensive policy tools like the regulation or investment in infrastructure, which may be necessary to address systemic issues. Nudges also face many ethical and practical critiques. Some argue that they can be paternalistic or manipulative, as they steer people towards certain choices without them necessarily being aware of it. This raises concerns about autonomy and transparency. Someone who may not want their organs to be donated might not be aware that they have to take steps to opt out of that default. There's also the risk that nudges may disproportionately affect those who are less informed or less empowered, potentially exacerbating social inequalities. But they could also be more helpful to less informed individuals, helping them naturally make a decision that is better for them without them even realizing it. Again, it's just going to depend on the decision and how you view the government's better decision compared to the alternative. Finally, critics caution that an over-reliance on nudges might divert attention away from the necessary structural reforms and ultimately making them deeper rather than actually solving the issue. But because they're often less costly and more politically palatable, governments often look for ways to nudge people toward the decision that governments want. Let me know in the comments if you think the idea of nudging people towards the decision you want them to take is ethical, or if governments should stick to more visible shove policies. But that's it for me today. If you found this video diving into nudges and shoves interesting, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.